We're going to be going over how to convert a standard M60 machine gun into an M60e4, or as it's otherwise known, a Mark 43. For the purpose of this video, I stripped my standard gun down to just the receiver, which is what we'll start with here. You'll notice I have my M60e4 Mark 43 feed hanger already mounted to the gun. That's held in place by 4 bolts or screws. You'll notice that I only have 2 screws in here. They go through the receiver and then through the hanger, and there's a nut there that holds it on. The reason I only have 2 screws here is because there's already 2 pre-existing holes in the receiver, which is where these are going through. The other 2 would require me to drill this out. This is a transferable machine gun, and I opted not to drill them out just so I don't detract from the value of the gun. So there's our Mark 43 hanger, feed tray with rollers. I have a standard M60 top cover on this gun. I don't have a E4 top cover yet. Okay, we'll start with our trigger assembly. Here's a standard M60 trigger assembly. Selector switch on the left side only. Pretty poor design. The sear can actually be installed backwards in this. Short grip, kind of uncomfortable. Here's our E4 trigger assembly. We have a selector switch on both sides. The sear cannot be installed backwards. Longer grip, much more comfortable for shooting. To install this, we have our notch in the bottom of the gun. You'll also notice this tab up here for the front mounting pin. On the back of our trigger housing, we have our tab. That tab slides right into the notch, and then you have to line your hole in your trigger housing up with the front mounting hole, which is on the trunnion. We have our E4 front pin, which goes right next to the hanger. That can be a little tricky to line up. This one just went in. So now we have our front pin in and our notch in the back, which is holding this in place. This is the other half of our E4 retaining clip. Again, this is a better design than the standard clip. So the back of this goes right on this pin that's in our trigger housing, and then the front will go through your front pin that you just put in, and we heard that snap in place. Now that's mounted. Okay. Second thing we want to install is our bipod. This is an E4 bipod. You'll know which way this goes on because our legs will only swing one way, and we want them swinging to the rear. So we're going to put on our bipod, our E4 sling swivel. You'll notice that that's kind of bent on an angle. You want that angled to the rear of the gun. There's a small tab on here to prevent this from rotating too much. That's going to be on the right side of the gun and pointing forward. And we have our E4 Mod O handguard. Before we go further with this, I'll show you how this works. The front of this, you'll notice there's a pin there with a spring in it. A detent, I guess they call it. This holds your bipod and your sling swivel all in place. That pin, when you slide this onto the gas tube, would go in a hole that is in the bottom of the gas tube. Again, transferable gun, I opted not to drill that hole in the bottom of this. If you are going to have it done, I recommend you have it done professionally by the people at Desert Ordnance or another qualified gunsmith. This assembly will stay on without drilling that hole in there. The barrel keeps it all in place, and it's a very tight fit to begin with. So we're going to take our bipod. First thing, we're going to line our sling swivel up. Again, tab forward, and you just want to line these holes up. We'll take our E4 handguard and we'll slide that through the top. So our bipod, our handguard, our sling swivel should all be lined up. Now, we'll take this and we're going to slide it right over our gas tube, and we'll slide it right in the front here, and it's going to be a real tight fit, and you'll feel it to start, hear that click. It just went on to the gas tube. Now again, we talked about this detent here. This is going to have to be depressed. And then once you depress that, the spring will go down, the stud will go down, and you can, sometimes you got to shake a little bit, slide this right onto the gas tube. Now this is completely mounted to the gas tube. You can see the gas tube coming out at the end there. So we have our bipod handguard. This handguard is held in place back here on the side of the trunnion. You'll see that there's a cutout, so it's sitting on that. Inside of the handguard is an aluminum heat shield. Alright, so we have our bipod on and our sling swivel and our handguard. Next we want to put our barrel assembly on. This is a E4 shorty or commando barrel. These are amazing, amazing. What the people at U.S. Ordnance have done is just unbelievable. You can YouTube videos of them putting 800 round belts through one barrel and one trigger pull. This has, your E4 gas system on it. This is an improved design. This won't rotate off as you're firing, whereas the older designs they would. They do make a longer barrel. I just like the short barrel. It's just a little better for maneuverability. So we want to get a good view here. Just put our chamber of our barrel into our trunnion, and we'll grab the front of this and we'll seat that. Just make sure it's seated all the way down. And as you can see, obviously, this barrel is pushing into the gas tube. That's going to hold all this in place anyway. We have our barrel retaining latch. We just want to make sure we're seated all the way, and we just press our detent there and slide the latch down, and our barrel is locked in place. So now let's get to the internals. We'll pop our feed tray up, and our feed tray cover and our feed tray, so we can install our op rod and bolt. Here we have our op rod and our bolt assembly. You can see that this is an E4 op rod. There's 2 notches in the bottom. What that does is that prevents a runaway gun. So if your shear is worn and if your op rod, if the first notch, say, gets worn, the second notch will catch it when you release the trigger. Again, prevents runaway guns. This is an actual E3 design. The E4 still uses it. So we want to rotate our bolt forward on the post of the op rod, because that's how it sits in the gun. And we'll slowly feed it in the back, lining it up properly with the receiver. Our actuator is going to be positioned at the top. So your bolt's going to stop about halfway when you put it in. That's because the sear in your trigger housing is catching it. So we want to put the gun on fire, squeeze the trigger, and let that bolt and op rod run forward. Next thing we want to install is our drive rod and drive rod spring. Here's a standard drive rod, original design. Here we have an E4 drive rod. This E4 drive rod is very much improved. It's a lot thicker, and it's just not going to bend as easy. We have our E4 drive rod spring. Again, it's just a little thicker, a little sturdier, and it's going to be a little more reliable. Our drive rod goes right into the back of the spring, and then this spring is fed right into the back of your op rod. So that's just sitting in the receiver now. We have our E4 buttstock. Again, another item that is just greatly improved over the E3 design. The difference is you have an aluminum butt plate, and you have this this shoulder guide, so this can sit in your shoulder as you're firing, just for a little more stability. In the back of this, you'll see a U shape. I don't know if you can see that. That U shape is what holds your buffer to your buttstock. So our buffer, the back of our buffer, sits in that U. So we'll go ahead and place that in there. This slides right in from the top. So now our buffer is in place. Now we're going to line our buffer up with our drive rod, and then we're going to make sure our buttstock is lined up properly. And sometimes you just got to tap this forward until you line your buffer up. There's a notch in the front of your buffer with this notch in the receiver, because that's where our retaining pin or clip goes in. That locks the buffer in place, which therefore locks your buttstock in place. So we'll slide that in the top, see if I have it lined up correctly, and I do. That should slide all the way down flush. And there we have a fully assembled M60e4 machine gun. Last part, obviously, when assembling this is you want to make sure you do a function check. So we'll rack our bolt to the rear. The weapon must be on fire in order to do that. You fill our bolt lock to the